Hello YouTube, we are here to talk about Bowtie. The sun is in your, Ceodore bootleg go on. Getting a BT plus. Didn't quite get the copium face, but he's bordering on that. And Cyan, I hate Necklord. Anyways, on this video, before you pull on Ceodore BT and Cyan LD, I'll give you some things to think about for you potentially use your resources. If you're new to the channel, I play both JP and Global, and I use some of that experience and knowledge to help inform y'all. Guide some decisions perhaps, but before we get going, be sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel if you are not already, go in the comment section, let me know what you're planning on doing for this banner and the event. Let's get it moving. Ceodore, we're talking about him first. It's weird, it's one of those weird banners where both characters are getting something, 2 weapon upgrades, but I'm gonna talk through them both, so let's talk. If you're not familiar with Ceodore's kit, he is a holy damage dealer, and with his upcoming LD board rework, he's going to become a holy enchanter for the party. He provides heals, he's a bit of a hybrid. He provides some support and some damage. He's got debuff cleanse for himself and the party. He does some support, party buffs, and he temporarily powers himself up in order to do more damage. It's an interesting mechanic. He goes Super Saiyan basically. It's the after years is just a Dragon Ball Z ripoff. Anyways, his rework, his skill 1 does actual damage now. There's a plus version that only applies when he's awakened, but that's probably all you're ever going to see because he should always be awakened. But it's a group AoE brave attack plus 50% splash. The LD now does 4 split HP attacks, and the LD buff. The condition for the auras to be active it was initially 100%, which was really obnoxious on its release, but now it's down to 50%. So as long as the party's above 50%, all of them, you're good. He always has party holy enchant. There's some weird conditionals going on with his buff in the description, but the gist of it is he's always got a holy enchant up, and he got party HP damage up 30% if the party's above 50%. Otherwise, it's just 20%. But it's a good amount of stuff, enchant, and that amount of HP damage up. His C90, his EX gets buffed, does way more damage. 5 split HP attacks, and the conditional for the plus version, which is the one you should care about, the 5 HP attack one is lowered to 50% instead of 100% again. So make him a lot more easy to use. It's not a pain to bring him in the party. His Awakening, Brave, and HPs now do 2 HP attacks, but you're probably not pressing those too often because skill 1 is almost certainly the better button to press. But they do charge his EX now, so it's not as bad of a button press. His BT. His Awakening is overhead that he gets from LD and skill 2. It doesn't decrease now. What does this do in practice? I'm not so sure. It means you don't have to burn the turn caring about Awakening falling off, but you were kind of pressing those buttons anyways to upkeep his damage, so this is kind of it's a weird effect, but sure. Otherwise, if a party member has above 50% HP, they get 100% brave damage up, which stacks nicely with his enchant. They get overflow, 30% more HP damage up for a functional 60% HP damage up for the party, and a 50% brave damage cap up. No HP cap up in sight. So my analysis for Ceodore, his strengths are he's got a crazy amount of HP damage up that's aura based. Your split attacks will cap. They will cap out of their HP cap. He's very self-sufficient because of the enchant and all the other goodies he gives himself. And he has that hybrid damage plus utility going for him. So if you need heals, you need cleanse, but you also need some damage, he can cover all those roles. Little guy, good job. And he's got the sword ultimate weapon, which means it's a popular weapon type and a lot of people can use it. As for weaknesses though, he does not give the party any HP cap at all. There are such a diminishing returns on HP damage up, and he boosts the party's HP damage like crazy, but he doesn't bring any of the cap up with it, which is infinitely more valuable and scales better the more HP attacks you have. His timer plus sucks. It's unity at base. He has the Bart's high armor, which leans into brave cap and doesn't do anything for the party. But since he has all that HP damage up, does he need the brave cap? No, he doesn't. So that's even weirder. Again, the BT effect is just it kind of missed the mark. All that HP damage up is just overkill, and just because of that, he has a lower damage ceiling. Like his skill 1 is not great, and he's really looking to do EX and LD for his big damage. Yeah, his damage isn't the best, and so his buffs aren't the greatest either. Teams, if you really want to abuse this stuff, you can bring him with Liud and Selfie to get more EX cast off. Selfie is actually questionable. I haven't tested the effectiveness, there's a word there, of running Selfie with Ceodore. I don't know if it's worth it to get his EX up faster in that way, but that might be an option. Secondary healer, just to make sure he is above his conditionals and the entire party is, and HP cap, so his damage isn't nearly stunted. Ultimate weapon is really the only way to really up his damage. Otherwise, it really is night and day there. But then again, that applies to everyone. Future fights, looking towards holy-ish things. He'll hit the Anacro fight. That fight's a joke anyways, but he can't hit the holy part of it. I can't really think of any fights that require a buttload of healing or cleansing, so that wasn't on my radar, but I'm sure it could be useful somewhere. Probably the Thancred fight now that I think about it, but let's keep moving. Now we're going to talk about Cyan, and it goes without saying again that I really hate Necklord. Cyan is a damage dealer, and he ignores enemy stats, so their defense and brave reduction, he'll just do his damage and not even calculate that when he's hitting them. He's also got enemy buff dispel, and he can cleanse debuffs from the party, Ezina. His rework does more damage, blah blah. His skill 2, however, it does set brave to, if the enemy has brave and he attacks them with the skill 2, it will set their brave to 0 before he attacks them, so he's got that utility there, potentially, if you really care about that. It's just a nice quirk. C90, he's got 5 HP attacks plus splash, and the plus version dispels 5 buffs instead of the 3 it did earlier. I think this is just more of a quality of life, because originally when Cyan got his dispel, I think we had only 6 debuff slots back then, but now we have 8, so the EX is being brought up to speed. But yeah, it's a decent damage increase. Now, this is where the fun begins, the LD. So Cyan's got this overhead, right? And he is only able to do the LD attack when his overhead is at 7 stacks. And this mirrors how he worked in Final Fantasy VI, which is pretty dope. It's a brave gain, and then he does 8 single target, single brave plus HPs. He does not consume his brave, however, in the middle of the attack. So any brave, it's kind of like, you know, Kane when he goes in the air and he like uses an HP attack, but the brave doesn't go away. Same thing here. So he'll just keep ramping up and up and up. If he's already batteried at the start of it, then you're just good to go. You're doing his HP cap every time, and he has 20% splash after each HP attack. So with HP damage debuffs, this will scale even harder on the splash end. So this is a lot of damage. This is a nuke, baby. This is a nuke. The LD buff, and it's the overhead, it's +1 when Cyan does something. Calls and additional ability do count, so you can manipulate this in your favor. It ignores brave damage reduction if the enemy has 0 buff. Well, it allows Cyan to ignore brave damage reduction. So he is almost, he's probably the true definition of true damage, but yeah, he's cutting through everything. So you can run him on Guy Lost Chapter and you won't notice a thing in those reductions. It's crazy. He gets 5 stacks at quest start, and his self buff, so the Embrave, the speed, and the concentrate, he gets those all at the quest start from his LD, so he won't need to like set up or anything. His calls, I'm sure plenty of you are aware now, but his LD call is a nuke because it does that same 8 HP attack that scales like crazy and doesn't dump brave, and you pop this in summon or something, or when a lot of BT effects are up, and you'll do a very pretty chunk of damage. Just hilarious, and it's a great co-op quality of life, because less time for people to use Jack and Kurasame calls in co-op than when you could just use Cyan instead. I don't know why nobody's using Ida call in co-op. Why the Kurasame in co-op will never end. Anyways, his strengths. Dispel plus cleanse, nice utility. I can't quite tell you how often that's needed, but it's nice to have on a damage dealer. He is the truest of true damage, provided the enemy is not buffed, and his HP, well, no, that HP condition is on as excuse me, but yeah, he'll be just hitting hard, brave damage wise all the time. The nuke LD, he's famous for it. Shout out to Stimpy showing off the bazooka, Cyan, and he's got a great sword ultimate weapon, which is a pretty flexible ultimate weapon type, provided you decide to invest in him. Weaknesses. His utility is a double-edged sword, because if you're bringing him to fights where he can handle those places where he needs to dispel or he needs to as another party, then it's gonna probably be uncomfortable to bring him in the first place. So those conditionals can be very annoying, because he needs to be at above 80% HP in order to use his plus version of his EX that dispels. And the plus version of his EX is the one that cleanses the party of debuffs. And to actually get the brave damage resist part of his LD buff, you need the enemies need to have not any buffs in the first place. So you got to manipulate his skills such that you're doing that well. He's slow as hell, so while it does take a little bit more time to charge up, it'll be worth it. His base skills aren't that great either, and I just want to pointing out like functionally how his kit works. Because Cyan has to reset his stance after using his EX every time, it's not really like 7 of Cyan's turns that it'll take to charge his LD. It's more like 5, because 2 of those are probably going to be the free skill you burn after using EX. So he is a bit slow. He can get that LD up pretty consistently throughout the fight. It'll be up a bunch of times, but his base skills, when you do gotta press them, they aren't great. So you're really the brunt of his damage is going to be carried by his LD and EX, and the EX is on a 3 skill recast. Or is it 4? I don't know. Ask Necklord. Fuck. As for teams, you want to raise the HP cap for his LD attack, because that's what he's really there for, because it's nasty. You want to double up on utility to make sure he can always hit those conditionals, so you can bring under the healer along, bring a secondary dispeller so Cyan can do his amount of damage. Future fights, maybe Kieran's BT chapter. I don't know if his overhead counts as a stackable buff, because if it does, then the orb for that fight is to have a 5-stack buff active. I don't know if Cyan counts, but if he does, that's great. The Shulk's Lost chapter, Stimpy did a really funny run with this, and I think it's worth calling out. You can pierce through the debuff, or the evasion on that fight with Cyan, because he's got guaranteed hits on I think all of his moves, so that's pretty funny. And then he's just a giant co-op quality of life, because are you tired like me of people using Kurasame call in co-ops and Jack co-ops, or Jack calling calls when you're already capping your damage? Well, look no further, because Cyan will end it faster. Oh, okay, now for the actual event. If you were playing when Lena initially got her LD in Global, this is the same exact fight, except it's a little less restrictive, different orb too. But it's +6 on holy damage taken, maxes out at 12. It's a non-lethal Brave plus HP on the orb, so you can live through it, but it is pretty nasty if you let the orb go off, so you kind of don't want to. This fight's actually it's a bit more of a wake-up call. This fight's a little harder than anything we've gotten in a bit, but it cleanses 1 debuff from itself, so it can put on a very strong buff for themselves. I think it's like HP damage up, dealt, or Brave. They get stronger, basically. And they can't hit you. You do less damage, so they reduce, words are hard, they reduce the amount of Brave and HP damage that they take. They put a nasty debuff on us, so we deal less HP damage, and they take less HP damage, so we end up probably doing 0 unless we're stacking a crazy amount of HP damage up, which is probably how they were selling Ceodore, and they frame their turns for 2 turns. You really don't want to see this go off. Yeah, it's nasty. The boss is against the Sahagin from the Lena LD fight, and it is magic absorb, but you can imperil this time. They do buff themselves a lot and debuff you all, so it's in your best interest to be cleanse and or dispel. Aerith does this in 1, although it's attached to a 2-turn buff that can easily fall off. So, but she hits all the. So if you carry Aerith's damage, she can actually be very beneficial for this fight. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So for the orb, Aiko is probably one of the a top 3 unit for this stage, just because even if the orbs go off, and these guys do have some dangerous attacks, Aiko will revive through it. She'll enchant the party to hit the orb. It's good all around. Kuja, a bit more offensive than Aiko, but he can do the Holy Enchant. Ashe, Paladin Cecil help keep you alive. Aerith, if you can maintain her debuff on both targets, they won't buff themselves, and she provides debuff immunity. Lena providing debuff immunity. Yuffie having cleanse on her skill 2, and then preventing the enemies from buffing, provided the debuff order is correct. Arciela can dispel them and silence them, so you never get jacked up. Vanille can dispel them, Beatrix can dispel them, or Balthier can handle the double dispel and cleanse, and then Yuna can get rid of the debuffs on you. So what are my plans? Skip. Yeah, I think Ceodore is pretty rough. I don't have his LD. I'm on the fence about ticketing this banner for Cyan's LD call for the co-ops. I mean, I live without it in JP, and while it's good, it does a lot of damage, and it's a viable call slot just for the damage alone. Because if you got enough effects up and you're going hard, then this call can clear out a considerable chunk of people's stuff. But I would never run Cyan in party because Necklord, honestly. That's not true. I think Cyan's actually pretty solid in party, actually, but I just wouldn't run him. So yeah, skip for me personally. Although depending on my Rem and Fang pulls, spoiler, I'm gonna go for both of them. I might come back and ticket this banner. So before you pull on this banner, what are my thoughts? From a meta perspective, some things to consider. I can't recommend this banner really anybody. I think maybe if you were like ticket cap, but even if you were ticket cap, I'd say like go for Rem and Fang first, like I'm doing, and then come back to this banner. I think you can live without Cyan's LD call. Really, it's really funny, and it's got great co-op quality of life, and even beyond that, Cyan is a solid unit in party provided you've invested in him, like all other damage dealers. But I think Ceodore's a mess. I think his BT is a mess. I think he's one of the worst BT users to date. Especially in the current era, because we're about to get people who out damage him and bring more HP cap. So what niche is he really providing? He's helping HP attacks cap, which already wasn't very hard in the first place, considering all the loaded effects and the low reductions on the bosses compared to our strength. So yeah, I think this is a bad banner overall, you're better off just save a Rem or something if you're really itching to pull. I would not recommend anybody touch this. I think Ceodore is a mess. Maybe he'll make more sense when he gets an FR, but we'll stay tuned for that. That's all I got though. This video ran a little bit long. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, what you're doing for the banner and the event. Separate video for Titus coming out eventually, and I'll catch you guys later. All right, peace.